Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Gilly MacMillan. Gilly is the internationally best-selling author of What She Knew, The Perfect Girl, Odd Child Out, I Know You Know, The Nanny, and To Tell You the Truth. She resides in Bristol, England, and The Manor House is her newest book. Welcome, Gilly.
Thank you very much for having me, Danielle.
It's so fun. I love the Manor House. I have so many things I want to talk about. But first, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the Manor House?
So the Manor House is primarily the story of a young couple called Nicole and Tom. And Nicole and Tom are childhood sweethearts. And they're pretty young still, and they've begun a very ordinary life. They're very much in love with each other. They're starting out. But one day, everything changes because they win the lottery. And like I think many of us might do in that situation, they have a real estate upgrade and they convert some old ruins that are in the grounds of a manor house into their new property, which is it's a glass barn. It's very, very modern and beautiful, and the location is spectacular. So they're very happy. They move in, and the book opens with Nicole coming home one morning, and she enters this new home. It's a smart home. It has an awful lot of features, which Nicole doesn't love, but her husband insisted on. So there's music blaring. It's blaring through the house. It shouldn't be doing that if the smart features are working. So she starts to hunt for her husband. He can't hear her calling because the music's too loud. And she works through the house. She's a little tetchy because he's left his coffee cup out. He hasn't made the bed. And eventually she winds up on the balcony of their bedroom, and she looks down, and he's floating in the swimming pool, and he's dead. And the book asks, was he murdered? And if he was, who did it and why? And all the action kicks off from those first few pages.
It's so true. And one of the things I love about that scene is it's not just music, it's opera, which I feel like has this, it kind of has this eerie, there's something about opera, right? That if it's really loud and you can't hear it, there was something really sort of eerie and dark about that, Gilly. I loved that. And it made me, I could picture it, right? Because it's a weird, mournful kind of sound in a lot of cases, right?
For sure. And also it's got a little bit of an extra meaning in this book because Tom and Nicole are brand new millionaires. And they don't really know how to behave as millionaires. There's no guidebook, right? And one of the things they think they should be doing is what they think of as improving themselves. And Tom is getting into opera, and that's why it's playing. So they don't even love it. It's just what they think they should be listening to.
Right, exactly. They're trying to be cultured, exactly.
Yeah.
So I always love to hear from, authors about the seed for the story, sort of where did it, can you sort of help identify where this idea came from and how it sort of developed for you? I love that.
Yeah, so I started off thinking about pyramid schemes and not big Bernie Madoff style schemes, but smaller ones, the kind of ones that take place in neighborhoods, primarily often between women, where people start a little business and it pulls people in, they make connections with other family members, with friends, with neighbors. Sometimes it spreads beyond one neighborhood into another. And obviously, when it all falls apart, it wrecks so many lives of people who live in very close proximity and have very strong relationships. So I started with that. I wanted to write about that, but necessarily that would need a huge cast of characters, which isn't that suited to thrillers. So I was grappling with it. I wanted to write about money as a motive, and my agent, I've got to give this one to her, she said, what about writing about a couple who win the lotto? So I had Tom and Nicole already. I already knew who they were, so I just moved them into this book and gave them a lottery win. And I thought I can explore everything to do with money and how money works as a motive.
Yeah. And you do hear these stories. I mean, there's all these statistics that say winning the lottery, or likely to be bankrupt in a very short amount. I mean, people just, we don't know. It's just so much money, right? They don't know. I mean, Tom buys a Maserati because, it seems like the thing you would have to do if you had 10 million pounds of lottery money. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's just it is really interesting to see how people react. And actually, I think Nicole and Tom take a very conservative standpoint on it. Like they're determined not to be the sort of people who just burn it all, and so they're being smart about it. And yet you can't help but also become sort of prey for people that find out about that and want to latch on to your winnings, right?
Oh yeah, I think it makes you very, very vulnerable. I mean, I did some fascinating reading about people who win the lottery. My goodness, there's some rabbit holes there that you can go down on the
I'll
internet.
bet.
And people, and a surprising number of people lose it all. And not only do they lose the money, they wreck family relations and friendships and all kinds of things. But they've also been under pretty intolerable pressure because people have come out of the woodwork. And it's like, once you start helping people, where do you stop?
So that's an interesting thing. So one of the parts of the book is that Tom has this old friend, Patrick, who is like family. The three of them, Patrick and Nicole and Tom, all grew up together. And Tom and Nicole got married, and you can see the dynamic of this. You do a beautiful job of building in sort of that, Patrick's odd man out, right? I mean, they were all friends, but Tom and Nicole got married, and Nicole's protective of Tom and a little bit less sort of accepting or tolerates Patrick's behavior a little bit less. So then Tom's trying to help Patrick and also keep Nicole happy, and and he becomes this sort of a sore point in their relationship, because they give him money as a gift, and you'd think whatever they gave him was more than he sort of earned, right? And yet no, it's not enough. And he is somebody who of course always has a scheme about how to get. I mean, that's the thing, that they're surrounded by people with these sort of schemes. So when you say you had Tom and Nicole already, that's interesting to me. So explain what you mean by that.
So when I was trying to develop the book as kind of about one of these neighborhood pyramid schemes, which is, by the way, there's some terrific documentaries on that kind of thing on Netflix. And I had begun to develop characters, and I had begun to develop a few couples, because I think that it's often the women who get involved. It's often housewives who have time on their hands, and you can see why, because it gives you connections and it gives you something to do, and often you feel like you're starting your own business and contributing back to your family and all kinds of things. I think women are vulnerable to those schemes in particular.
Right.
So I had thought up Tom and Nicole, and I'd thought up a few other couples as well, because I wanted to bring marital tensions in as well, because money is such a source of marital tension for so many people. We rarely agree completely with our spouse about everything to do with money, right? And Tom and Nicole, I just fell in love with. I thought they were great. I really liked them. They're sweet couple.
Isn't that funny? So it's, how do you develop character? Are you, do you have tools that you use for this? Are you find their faces in the world, or, do you write about them to develop them? So I'm just curious to know, because everybody does it a little differently.
No, I don't do any of that. They just kind of land in my brain. It's almost like they've been living in the back somewhere, and they just step forward and say, "Would be perfect for this book."
Yeah.
And then as soon as you get to know them and you start to write a little bit, you soon know, I think. I mean, you possibly feel this. The ones that you're more drawn to for either out of curiosity or because you share some traits, or
or a little of all of it, right? I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, Nicole and Tom are both they're those characters that you root for, and you also think, oh no, why did you do that? I mean, it's sort of that there's they feel very universal. They feel very approachable. And so actually, let's talk about the people that live at the manor house, right? At the manor house, we have this sort of young couple. Ollie is a writer, and Sasha is a yoga instructor. And then of course they live there with the housekeeper, caretaker Kitty. And that is an interesting dynamic too. I mean, the idea that isn't, they don't own the home, but they've lived there, and that's its own sort of stressor, right? Because they really don't have, she makes a little bit of money teaching yoga. He doesn't make any money yet, because as we appreciate, he's writing his first book, right. And that is not a lucrative endeavor at the beginning. So, so they too have a very different kind of money stress, right? Really no money of their own. They're sort of depending on different people. And even as a yoga instructor, you sort of are depending on these clients. It's a little bit of a service, right? Industry. If your clients, if you're in a bad mood or whatever, your clients don't like you, they don't come back. So that's interesting too. And I think that really determines their dynamic, right?
I agree. And I wanted them to also be a young couple. So I had to think of a scenario where another young couple could be in the manor house. I didn't want them to have inherited it. That would be a little dull. I mean, that's a different book, put it that way.
Right.
But I just thought, well, this is interesting because this is a young couple who, as you say, have a very different financial setup, but they also live in the same beautiful spot. They live in a very, very gorgeous and historic old manor house, which is full of its own secrets. And they have Kitty there working for them, which adds a whole other dynamic, because it's a real contrast to, Nicole, who's inherited this money. She's still quite determined to be herself. She hasn't got her head around the fact that she wants staff or anything. She feels a bit intimidated by the people they deal with since they've got rich. But Ollie and Sasha are sitting very comfortably in this house they don't own, and they have staff. And they don't, as you say, earn a great deal of money. Ollie in particular sits on his backside in the best room in the house.
I know.
He's going to be a brilliant novelist.
Let's talk about Ollie. I mean, this is again the sort of, man and women dynamic, right? I mean, Ollie is very entitled. He very much is just like, right, I'm doing the important work. This is what I need to be doing. And everybody needs to be serving me, which is such a contrast to Tom, right? Who is this, and it's, and those two, obviously, they want it, Tom really wants to find a connection with the neighbors, right? Because he's isolated in this new, this new house. And then there's this old versus new. I love that about the houses, right? There's a very old house and a very new house, which also sort of talks about class, right? So that was obviously part of it. So talk to us a little bit about that, because that to me seems to be the houses are a very good metaphor for sort of what's going on with sort of the class.
I mean, I really kind of went for it in terms of exaggerating what new money and old money and status kind of provide you with in terms of a base to live in and what that says about you. And you can just imagine the glass barn with Tom's Maserati in the drive, it's sort of straight out of, I don't know, Beverly Hills or somewhere, or, Long Island or somewhere. And I think I wanted to really go with that because Tom and Nicole, they're really young. They don't really know what to do with their money. That's the dream they have. And it's just in such contrast to this ancient house that's been sitting there forever. And you can immediately imagine the tensions that might arise in terms of how the separate parties feel about each other. They want to be friends, but it's hard.
Right. And Tom and Nicole bought this piece of property from the manor house. So really they have sort of settled new money on this recently purchased land, taken from old money. There's a lot of really wonderful layers to that. And that the relationship between the women is interesting too. I mean, the idea that Kitty is this much older, woman, and Sasha is sort of she's the head of the house, like the woman of the house, and yet that feels sort of backwards too. And Sasha isn't always very comfortable. She acts at sometimes very comfortable with bossing Kitty around, and at other times worrying that like she doesn't really have control of, of the situation and of her staff, right?
I think that's right. Sasha has got a lot of tensions going on. So she's your classic, show yourself on social media as unbelievably fabulous. She's got the body, she's got the home, she runs the business. But if you peel back that layer, she's got a partner who's tricky. She doesn't own this home. There is somebody working in this home who she might not necessarily have hired, but she's got to have there. And it's all not quite as perfect as it seems, which is a kind of a cliche for thrillers, but it's what we love to explore as thriller writers, the layers beneath, isn't it? And Sasha, I think, is a good example of that.
She really is. And I do think that there's also this really important theme about what things look like, right? What the appearances of something. And I think everyone in this book is trying to appear, a specific way. And every single person in this book has something very big to hide, right? Where they're protecting their hide. And yet there's also this wonderful thing, like the relationship that starts to grow between Kitty and Nicole. Like we want, like, as you said, women are isolated by, oftentimes by career. If we end up at home with the children, they're isolated by, I think, as you said, women are more vulnerable to these kinds of scenarios because we need community, we want community. And yet oftentimes because of our circumstances, we don't get it. Right. So we then latch on to anything that feels like community.
Yeah, so Nicole, and that's actually an interesting point about Nicole. First, she thinks, oh, Sasha will be my friend and Ollie will be Tom's friend, but that is not going to work. They're far too different. But then she does find common ground with Kitty because Kitty's actually empathetic, and so is Nicole. She's beneath the money. She's kind of straightforward. She was raised by women who worked, women who swept their own front porches. She has that kind of work ethic and that's where she's come from, and she wants to kind of maintain that, and she finds more in common with Kitty than she does with Sasha on that front.
She absolutely does. So what do you think? I mean, there's something about this book which feels to me very much like a UK thriller, and I don't know what. I mean, maybe it's the old house. Like, I mean, I'm obviously in America, and nothing is as old probably in this country as that house is, but I mean, not quite, but you know what I'm saying. But is it a UK? Do you feel that way? Like, do you feel like you when you read a US thriller versus a UK thriller, and obviously this is a gross generalization, but I'm curious to sort of explore the differences, because I do feel like sometimes I read a book and I'm like, okay, this is that kind of, it feels like a British thriller. Is it because, there's all these people and is it the ambience of this old home, or am I making that up? Gilly, what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like we almost need a third party from a different country to tell us.
Exactly.
It's something I wonder about a lot. I mean, this book has been packaged a bit like my thriller, The Nanny, and I think in a way that I think doubles down on the British thing. Interestingly, in the UK, it's got a completely different title. It's called The Fall. Yeah, because a manor house isn't that appealing to us. We've got them all over the place.
What's it called in the UK?
The Fall. I was going to see if I could. There's the proof.
Oh my God! Isn't that different? Once you're on top, it's a long way down. I love that. That is so. So interesting.
I'm not sure what the differences are. I definitely know when I read some books, authors like Lou Berney, I think that's a very American book. There's something that feels to me as a British person very American in the core of his stories.
That's sort of like that noir American though, right? I mean, that's sort of like Lou's books, which I love Lou and his books, but it's very like, it's atmospheric Midwest sort of.
Yes.
And maybe that's part of this, what I'm getting from the Manor House. And it is, of course, so ironic that they titled it The Manor House for us and The Fall for you.
I know.
But I think it's also the idea that it's like Lisa Jewell does this a lot too, where everybody in the book has something that's not quite, they're not quite being honest about, right? Every single person in the book.
Right.
I mean, down to really the detectives, sort of and I love that, because I think it's, and I don't know if we just don't do it because we feel like we really want someone who's like the good guy and everything else is shades of gray. But I think it is a thing that even if it's not something that's necessarily criminal or, or even despicable, despicable or in any way, there's always something. And I love the fact that as you're getting to the end of the story and you totally think you know exactly what happened, just like one twist after another, you're just like to the last page and you're like, oh boy, and I think that feels British to me. And I don't know, we're just, I love it. I mean, I love that you
That's
guys.
so interesting.
Everybody.
I wouldn't have identified that as a British thriller thing, but now I'm going to have to think about that and think about comparing.
Yeah,
actually.
I mean, obviously, both. I think Americans have books like that, but I
Yeah.
don't. I think it's not as much in our nature to do these and maybe it's because there's like a sense of American impatience. We have to it has to be faster, and so we streamline some of these things, or maybe it's because we want to be idealistic and think that somebody in the story is 100% in the good, but it's not very realistic. And so I do think, I don't know why I come up with that. That's just, and that makes
it's fascinating, Danielle, completely fascinating. I'm going to be thinking about that.
And I'm sure you'll think about it for 10 minutes and debunk it in a million ways. But it did occur to me as I was reading this, I was like, this is so, it feels so fabulously British. And I wonder if it had been called The Fall, if I would have seen it differently. So
I wonder, I mean, I do think if you have place as character, like as Lou does, it does give more of a flavor of nationality. I mean, that's quite a crude way to do it, I suppose, or way to talk about it. But yeah, that's an interesting question. If it was The Fall.
Yeah, I mean, how would it have changed this for us? Yeah. But it is, can you talk a little bit about, so, when you were creating these couples, you said Tom and Nicole were in your sort of original draft, but Ollie and Sasha came about when you sort of changed the story.
Yeah, I had Sasha pretty quickly.
Okay.
I thought she was such a good foil to Nicole. That's how she came. I thought I need somebody who's almost a perfect fit for Nicole as a friend, but then who perhaps isn't quite. So it wasn't hard to come up with Sasha. Ollie took me a while because I've written about a writer before. I thought, shall I? And then I thought, it's too tempting with a manor house and the fact that he doesn't have to earn at this moment. And I was just thought, no, it's great. It's the perfect setting for him. And he's a pain. He's a pain.
Yes, he's such a pain. Isn't that funny? And his sort of, and you have to read the book, so I'm not going to say anything, but the level of entitlement is sort of just through the course of the book, like it's like very clearly he's an incredibly smart person, but he's not that bright about a few things, right? He's not very self-aware, which I
have to say I enjoyed writing him so much because he's the absolute opposite of all working writers that I know of my friends, male or female, nobody's like that. But that's what a lot of people think. Writing
I know, like. exactly that we just think that we just sit in a room and think we're brilliant, which of course is exactly with the opposite. We sit in a room and think we're idiots. We think we're talentless and stuck forever. But it is interesting. I do think there's something, and we can all speak to this, that first book, when you do have a little bit more of at least I did, and I think it's naivete more than anything else, that you think, oh, I got this. Look at me. I am so good. And then, and then the end happens and of course.
I think I have that sometimes with the odd sentence. I go, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
but
not a book
as far as it goes. Then,
exactly.
And then the next minute, I'm like, yeah, but the book's terrible. I'm terrified of this, and this is awful, and it's hard to sustain it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But as a debut, I think what I didn't know about the industry was everything, and so I think if I did have hope, it was based on a completely fabricated idea of what a writing life was like.
Right. Well, that is, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's what's so clever about Ollie. And so entertaining. I mean, I think you don't need to be an author to think Ollie is a entertaining character. But I do think if you are an author, then there's a little extra, or if you if you're somebody who follows authors and knows what authors go through, then there's a little extra sort of joyous kick in Ollie, because he's very delusional about what the at least.
He's a
At
gift to
least.
my writer friends, really.
Yeah,
and also
exactly.
to everybody else too.
Exactly. We get to something to laugh at when the days are hard. So tell us, I mean, are these out the same time is it in the UK and the US?
No, the UK edition came out much earlier this year, and it's coming out in paperback in a really different cover, actually, a really cool cover with the swimming pool on it and the body in it. It's coming out in February in paperback here, so it's on a very different schedule.
Isn't that so? I find that really interesting. That's got to be a little hard. You're like, I already did this book, and now I'm so you must, I mean, so tell us what's coming next, because it sounds like it should be, you got something in the hopper, I'm sure.
It should be, but I've had a very slow year. I wrote a book a year for 8 years, and hit a big fat brick wall this year. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to slow down for a little bit. So I do have something new in the works. I am very excited about it. It is a thriller. It's a little bit different from what I've been doing, and that's about all I can say about it. I'm about to send it to my agent, so we'll find out.
Well, let's actually, though, I think let's talk about that for a second, Gilly, because one thing that we don't often talk about, and every one of us has gone through, is that like, this is not sustainable. This one book a year. I mean, I know the business wants it, readers want it. I mean, obviously we love the idea of it, but to get one book out a year, how much time off do you have?
I mean, none, if you're doing a book a year, because by the time you finish promotion, or even by the time you finish, before you've done copy edits and proofread, you have to be thinking about the next one. And that's how I do it anyway. I don't know about you. How long does it take you to write a draft?
I mean, the problem with me is I'm a quick drafter, but then usually I have to throw the entire draft away. So, 4 or 5 months, and then I have to shred it, and it takes 4 or 5 months to redo it. I mean, it's not sustainable. And I did realize that I do not have a book coming out in 2024. And I did realize
we have
that
a club we can start, Danielle. See you in 2025.
Exactly. See you in 2025. I mean, I'm hoping. I'm still anyway, but it's neither here nor there. But I do think, I talked to another friend about this yesterday. I do think it's not. We're and we know, like, we're so lucky to do what we love to do. Yes. So this is not a bitching session about being a working writer, but it is a session about the idea that you can do this, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you think, I'm tired. I don't have and you probably also, we're not just writing, right? We have a house to lead, and we have families we're taking care of, and you get sort of burnout, and you think, I need nothing new is coming. I think I need to fill the well. So good for you.
Yeah. And if I did get ideas, I was having ideas, but they weren't good enough to make a book. Mm-hmm. And I think, I am so full of respect for a lot of friends of mine do a really good quality book every year, but I just thought, this is not going to be good quality if I do it. Right. So yeah, I called it, and I hope the next one will be good, better for it,
Oh, it will. And also, don't you think you'll be a little better, right? I mean, just a little sharper, a little more grateful, a little bit more rested. There is a sense that you can squeeze, you can only squeeze blood from a turnip for, that's not the right saying, but you know what I'm saying.
I get it.
You're out. Yeah. You're out. And I actually think that happens. And I think you have to respect it, because it's a job, but there's also some magic to it.
Yeah.
And you can't force it.
There's the really important thing of quality control, because it's, in the end, our job, the only thing we really have control of is what we write and how we write it. Before it goes through edits. And if you feel like you're slightly losing control of that, that's a problem.
And I do think we see people who are, so determined, and so pressured for lots of reasons, contracts, finances, to stay on the book a year, that then the book suffers. And as you said, it's really it's not in our best interest. It's not in the best interest of the book. And I hope you got support for that. Like, I hope that which is,
I kind of dug my heels in, because it became clear very quickly that it was going to have to be that. So I was a bit stubborn, and I was very grateful that people were supportive. And also I want to make clear, I don't think that people writing a book a year, the quality necessarily suffers at all.
Oh,
It just happens
no.
for me. Yeah.
Right.
Because some people can do it stunningly well.
Yes, and I agree with you. And then some people are just naturally, they're better first drafters, or they're faster,
Yes.
or they're,
Yes.
or they're younger. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
this now. I mean, I'm 53. I'm not,
Same. We are the same age.
I am not as up for, I don't write until midnight the way I used to, and then bounce back up in the morning and think, oh, I got it again. Everything is a little bit slower. So
I think my productive period has been compressed till from between about 10 a.m. to about 12 a.m., 12 in the morning.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I feel like 10 and 2, those are my best hours. I'm like, I got 4 hours, but then, life gets in the way. So no, I agree with you. There's authors that put out, I mean, some authors put out more than one book a year and still do it.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know how.
extraordinary too.
I don't know how they do it. I mean, Alison Brennan writes like 2 or 3 books a year. That's insane. So I'm not for sure. It's not a rule.
Yeah.
I wish I was one of them, but I am definitely not. So, but okay, so we have this, America, you have this to look forward to if you haven't already snapped it up. But I know it's out already in the US, because I know our interview's a little bit later than I wanted to get it in. But I'm so glad we did. I love that it's called The Fall. It's such a different, this is probably what makes me think of a British novel. Look at it looks like it's raining, and it's it's got the fog and the manor house and the woods. Anyway, they did a great job. I love that there's a total difference.
Sorry, I lost you there a second, Danielle.
I saw it. I went a little unstable there. I was just saying that I think this is what made me think probably of British novels, is this eerie, foggy, wet cover, right? I mean, it looks like it. I love it too.
They showed me a version that, sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead. They showed you a version.
They showed me a version that was kind of green, which was very beautiful, but we went with that just because of the atmosphere.
Yes, I like the gray. In fact, sometimes I try to think about matching. Here I am in my cozy, because it's actually raining. I'm in Montana, and it should be snowing, but it's raining, so it feels like this kind of day. Yeah. Time to get a cup of tea. Well, you're done with your day, I hope. So
I'm done. I'm nearly done. Yeah. So it's definitely time for a cup of tea.
I'm so excited. I think people will, if you haven't read it, Gilly MacMillan, and this is my first of your books. So I've seen you everywhere, but I just hadn't had an opportunity to read you yet. And now
well, thank you. Thank you for reading it.
Very much looking forward to going back to the others, and good luck with your new project. I say congratulations for recognizing that you needed to take more time. And I know it will serve the book and it's what you needed.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to hear from somebody who gets it.
Yeah, this has been that year for me too. So I absolutely get
right
it.
Back at you then. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll get there. Well, 2025 will be our year.
We will.
So everyone, this has been Gilly MacMillan, and Gilly with a G, if you're looking for her online and you're listening. Gilly MacMillan's The Manor House, such a wonderful atmospheric read. And Gilly's obviously brilliant. It was so fun to have you on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we will see you next time on Killer Women. Bye.